The desert stretched endlessly. A dust-covered pickup rumbled across the dunes above two. A-10 Warthogs descended like predators. Their shadows swallowing the truck orders were clear intercept. But as the lead pilot zoomed in, a patch on the driver's shoulder came into focus. Faded, frayed, unmistakable, the radio, once filled with cocky banter, fell silent. The hunt was over before it began. What did they see? Sergeant Alex Monroe, 36 years old, had once been a member of the elite Desert Ghost Unit specialists in desert warfare and rescue operations for captured targets behind enemy lines. After her discharge due to combat injuries, she had transitioned to supporting humanitarian organizations along the Middle Eastern border, using her survival skills and quick reflexes to navigate dangerous territories that others couldn't reach, despite her civilian status. Her uniform and unit patches remained part of her identity, especially the faded desert ghost patch on her shoulder, something that only those who had endured the harshest combat conditions dared to wear today. She was on an emergency medical transport across the border, but something had gone wrong. The faded patch on her shoulder was now battered by desert wind and sun, its skull and distinctive desert symbols barely visible but unmistakable to those who knew what to look for. She glanced in the rearview mirror, not to check if anyone was following, but to monitor the young boy burning with fever in the back seat. Medicine and clean water were running dangerously low. They had to cross the border before nightfall, or the child wouldn't survive the night. Suddenly she squinted. Not from the sun's glare, but because she had spotted something that made her blood run cold. The telltale distortion of air in the distance, a sign of jet engines approaching fast, very fast. Her training kicked in immediately. Alex recognized the sound signature before she could even see the aircraft. The distinctive rumble could only mean one thing. A 10 Thunderbolts nicknamed Warthogs ground attack aircraft, designed to eliminate targets exactly like her dusty pickup truck regional command, had scrambled the fighters to intercept what they believed was an unauthorized border crossing. In their eyes, she was just another smuggler or insurgent trying to slip through their surveillance net. Unidentified vehicle. You are in restricted airspace. Came the first radio transmission. On the emergency frequency, stop immediately and prepare for inspection. Alex keyed her radio with one hand while keeping the truck steady with the other. This is medical emergency transport. I have a critical patient requiring immediate evacuation. Negative unidentified vehicle, no medical clearance on file for this sector. Stop your vehicle now. In the back seat, the boy's breathing became more labored. His mother, a refugee who spoke no English, looked at Alex with desperate eyes that needed no translation. This child was running out of time, and bureaucratic procedures wouldn't save his life. Alex made a decision that would change everything. She pressed harder on the accelerator, knowing that every minute of delay could mean the difference between life and death for the patient in her care. I'm continuing to the border. She transmitted, this child needs immediate medical attention. The response was swift and threatening. Vehicle, you have violated direct orders. Military aircraft are inbound to enforce compliance. Stop now or face consequences. Through her dust-covered windshield, Alex could see the approaching fighters, two dark specks growing rapidly larger against the blue desert sky. The A-10s were closing fast, their massive GAU-8 cannons designed to tear apart armored vehicles, let alone a civilian pickup truck. But Alex had been in worse situations during her time with Desert Ghosts. She had walked through enemy territory for days, had carried wounded comrades across burning sand, had survived when everyone said survival was impossible. The difference was that back then she had been fighting enemies. Now she was being hunted by her own military pilots, who didn't know who she was or what she had sacrificed for the same flag. They served as the Warthogs closed the distance. Alex kept her hands steady on the wheel and her eyes focused on the horizon behind her. The life of an innocent child hung in the balance. Subscribe if you believe quiet veterans still own the desert with or without orders. The A-10 Warthogs closed in like hunting hawks, their massive forms casting shadows across the desert floor. Through her radio, Alex could hear the pilots' casual conversation, their voices filled with arrogance. Look at her. Go. The lead pilot chuckled. Little truck trying to play soldier out here. This should be quick. His wingman laughed. "I'm betting we wrap this up in one pass. Probably some smuggler who thinks they can outrun us." Alex turned off her radio receiver. She recognized that tone. The voice of people who had never walked on burning sand, never had to drink the last sip of water while giving their share to wounded comrades. She gripped the steering wheel tighter. Eyes never leaving the road ahead in the rearview mirror, she could see the boy's condition worsening, his small body struggling against the fever. The memories came flooding back, desert ghost operations, where she had been dismissed as just support personnel until the shooting started briefings where officers questioned whether a woman could handle combat pressure the countless times she had proven herself, only to start over with the next mission. "Control, this is Warthog lead," came the voice-over emergency frequency. "Target is maintaining course, looks like a single occupant, probably local insurgent testing our response time copy. Warthog lead, you are authorized to use intimidation tactics. Show them what happens when they test our airspace." The first A-10 dropped to impossibly low altitude, its massive engines roaring as it swept directly over Alex's pickup. The noise was deafening, designed to terrify anyone below into immediate surrender. But Alex had been through worse during Operation Desert Mirage. She had walked for 3 days through enemy territory while helicopters hunted her unit. She had learned to stay calm when death circled overhead. The second pass was closer. Close enough that Alex could feel the turbulence rocking her vehicle. The pilot was showing off now, demonstrating his complete control. Control target is not responding to intimidation, the wingman reported. Should we escalate to warning shots? Negative Warthog 2, continue harassment pattern. If they don't stop in 5 minutes, we'll discuss live fire options. Alex checked her GPS. The border was still 20 minutes away. 20 minutes that the child might not have, and 20 minutes these pilots apparently weren't willing to give her. She pressed harder on the accelerator, knowing speed was her only advantage against aircraft that could destroy her with a single cannon, burst the lead. A-10 banked hard and came around for another intimidation run. Approaching from the side, the pilot intended to fly parallel to her truck, close enough to make his point crystal clear as the massive aircraft swept alongside her pickup, flying barely 50 feet above the desert floor. Something changed. The pilot squinted through his targeting display. Getting his first clear look at the woman behind the wheel, he had expected to see a nervous smuggler or confused civilian. Instead, he saw someone whose posture radiated calm confidence, whose hands remained steady despite having a fighter jet nearly close enough to touch, but it was what he saw on her shoulder that made his blood run cold. The patch was faded, worn by years of desert sun and wind, but the distinctive skull and desert camouflage pattern of the Desert Ghost unit was unmistakable to anyone who knew military history. The pilot's face went pale beneath his helmet. He remembered the stories his commanding officer had told him, stories shared in hushed tones among pilots who understood real heroism. Stories about a ghost who had single-handedly led a rescue operation through 3 days of sandstorms to save a surrounded squad. His hands began to shake on the controls as realization hit him. The woman he had been hunting was one of the most decorated desert fighters in modern military history. Control. He stammered into his radio, his voice stripped of earlier arrogance. "Abort mission, I repeat. Abort all aggressive maneuvers, Warthog lead. Explain your status." Came the confused response, "That's Jesus Christ. That's a desert ghost." He whispered, voice barely audible. "Control. The target is confirmed, Desert Ghost unit. We are standing down immediately." The admission hung in the desert air like a shock wave. Every military person monitoring the frequency knew the call sign. Every pilot who had served in desert operations had heard the legends of the ghosts. The hunters had suddenly realized they were pursuing one of their own heroes. The radio silence that followed was louder than any jet engine. It was the silence of absolute respect, of a legend that had just emerged from the everyday world back into military consciousness. "Now we want to hear from you is true. Reputation built from shining rank insignia, or from the legendary stories whispered in reverent silence type legacy. If you believe some legends don't need recognition because they are history." The radio, silence stretched across the desert like a held breath in that moment. Everything changed. What had been a routine intercept mission suddenly became something else entirely, something that would be remembered and retold in military circles for years to come. Ground control monitoring all communications immediately began accessing classified databases that required the highest security clearances. The duty officer's fingers moved rapidly across his keyboard, pulling up files that most military personnel would never be authorized to see. Warthog lead. Warthog to maintain current position but do not engage, came the urgent transmission from the command center. We are verifying target identification. Colonel James Harrison. The base commander was immediately notified. He had been a young captain when Desert Ghost conducted Operation Sandstorm in 2015. The mission that had saved an entire Special Forces company from annihilation behind enemy lines. He knew the legends. And he knew they were more than just stories. "Get me everything we have on that vehicle," Harrison ordered his intelligence officer, "and patch me through to those pilots immediately." Within minutes, Alex Monroe's service record appeared on classified screens throughout the command center, despite heavy redaction due to the sensitive nature of her missions. What remained painted a picture of extraordinary heroism that few soldiers could match. Pilots. "This is..." Colonel Harrison came a new voice over the radio, carrying an authority that made both A-10 pilots sit straighter in their cockpits. "You are in the presence of Sergeant Alex Monroe, former Desert Ghost. She has full authorization to proceed on any heading necessary for her humanitarian mission." The lead pilot, still shaken by his recognition of the patch, maneuvered his aircraft to fly alongside Alex's pickup at a respectful distance. For the first time, he could see her clearly through the dusty windshield. She was smaller than the legends had made her seem, focused entirely on her driving and the precious cargo in her back seat. There was no anger in her posture, no triumph at being recognized. She was simply doing what she had always done, completing the mission. "No matter the obstacles, ma'am," the lead pilot transmitted, his voice completely transformed from the arrogant tone of minutes earlier. "This is Captain Mike Rodriguez, Warthog lead. I wanted to apologize for our earlier behavior. We didn't know." Alex Keir microphone briefly. "No apology necessary, Captain. You were doing your job, ma'am. My father served with the 75th Rangers. He was at Firebase Delta when Desert Ghost pulled them out. He always said he owed his life to a ghost who walked through hell to bring them home." The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. Alex remembered that mission. Remembered the young ranger who had been critically wounded while holding the perimeter. She remembered the 3-day trek through enemy territory, carrying wounded soldiers who couldn't walk, rationing water that was barely enough for one person among 8. "Your father was a good soldier," Alex replied simply. He held that line when it mattered most. Rodriguez felt tears forming in his eyes behind his helmet visor. The woman he had been ordered to intimidate was the reason his father had lived to see him grow up, the reason he existed at all. "Ma'am," Rodriguez continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Desert Ghost never walks alone. We're honored to provide escort." The two A-10 Warthogs took positions on either side of Alex's pickup truck. Their aggressive intercept formation transformed into a protective honor guard. What had begun as a hostile pursuit had become something unprecedented. Military fighters escorting a humanitarian mission across forbidden territory. Word of the situation spread rapidly through military networks. Officers who had been monitoring the routine intercept were suddenly briefing their superiors on the identity of the driver they had been hunting. One intelligence officer reported to his commander. "The target we've been tracking, she's the one who conducted the Kandahar extraction and the rescue at Observation Post Charlie and Operation Silent Thunder." Each mission name carried immense weight in military circles. These weren't just successful operations. They were legends that defined what it meant to leave no one behind, regardless of the cost or the odds. Colonel Harrison himself took over direct communication with Alex Sergeant Monroe. "This is Colonel Harrison, base commander. I want to personally ensure you have clear passage to your destination. What do you need from us?" "Just clear airspace." Colonel Alex replied, "I have a patient who needs immediate medical attention across the border. Consider it done. We're coordinating with Border Control to expedite your crossing. The child is going to make it, Sergeant, as the unusual convoy continued across the desert. Alex focused on her patient, while the A-10s maintained their protective formation overhead. The boy's breathing had stabilized somewhat, but he still needed immediate medical care in the cockpits above both. Pilots found themselves part of something larger than a routine mission. They were participating in the continuation of a legend, escorting one of the most decorated desert fighters in modern history as she conducted yet another rescue operation. Warthog, to base Rodriguez's wingman, transmitted, "Request permission to coordinate with medical teams at border crossing. We want to ensure smooth handoff for the patient. Permission granted. Warthog 2 full support authorized." As they approached the border, Alex could see the medical team already assembled at the crossing point. Alerted by the A-10's coordination efforts, the boy was going to receive the care he needed. Sergeant Monroe Rodriguez transmitted as they reached the border. "It's been the highest honor of my military career to fly with you today. The honor was mine." Captain Alex replied, "Thank you for the escort," as her pickup truck crossed into medical safety and the A-10s turned back toward their base. Alex allowed herself a small smile. The faded patch on her shoulder had just reminded an entire military command structure that some honors transcend paperwork, some legends never retire, and some ghosts never truly disappear. The boy was rushed to the waiting medical team, his mother crying tears of relief as doctors immediately began treatment. Another life had been saved, another mission completed successfully behind them. The two A-10 Warthogs climbed into the desert sky. Their pilots forever changed by the encounter. They had learned that real heroism often traveled in dusty pickup trucks, carried by people who sought no recognition for their extraordinary courage. The desert that morning had witnessed something rare, the moment when legend and reality intersected, when stories became truth, and when the past reached out to protect the present. Alex Monroe drove away from the border, crossing her mission, complete her identity, once again fading back into anonymity. But for those who had witnessed what happened in the desert that day, the memory would last forever. 3 days later, the story of the desert ghost in the A-10 escort had spread throughout military networks like wildfire, not as casual gossip, but as a reminder of what true service looked like. Captain Rodriguez requested permission to visit the humanitarian organization where Alex worked. When he arrived at the dusty compound, he found her maintaining her pickup truck and preparing for the next mission. "Sergeant Monroe," he said, standing at attention despite being in civilian clothes. "Just Alex now," she replied, looking up from checking her radiator. "And you must be Captain Rodriguez." He relaxed slightly. "Yes, ma'am. I wanted to thank you personally for what you did for my father. Your father thanked me already years ago." That was enough. Rodriguez pulled out his phone and showed her a photo, a middle-aged man in a wheelchair smiling while holding a young child. "He's retired now, but he still talks about that day. Says he never expected to see his family again until he heard footsteps in the sand." Alex nodded, remembering the mission. Clearly, Firebase Delta had been surrounded for 4 days when Desert Ghost received the extraction order. "We had a rule in Desert Ghosts," Alex said. "The desert doesn't abandon its own." Rodriguez smiled. "He uses that phrase now. He's teaching survival courses for young rangers." Word of the A-10 encounter had reached other military personnel. Young pilots began seeking out information about Desert Ghosts, learning about operations that had been classified for years. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, a young helicopter pilot, drove 6 hours to meet Alex after hearing about the incident. "Ma'am, I wanted to ask about making decisions under pressure," Chen said. "How do you balance following orders with doing what's right?" Alex paused her work. "You don't balance them, you find a way to do both. Sometimes that means accepting consequences for what you know is right. But what if the consequences could end your career? Then you remember why you put on the uniform. It wasn't to follow orders blindly. It was to serve something bigger than yourself." The humanitarian organization received an unexpected donation from an anonymous military fund. The contribution was enough to purchase 2 new vehicles and medical supplies for 6 months. Colonel Harrison also reached out offering Alex a consulting position, training military personnel in desert survival and humanitarian operations. We need someone who understands that rules exist to serve people. Harrison explained during their phone conversation. Alex considered the offer. I appreciate the recognition, Colonel, but my work is here. These people fall through the cracks of every system I understand. But would you consider training sessions for our younger personnel that I can do? The A-10 pilots who had escorted her began coordinating with humanitarian organizations providing intelligence on safe corridors and potential threats. Word spread that there was someone in the desert who went places others couldn't. Alex's compound became an unofficial training ground for military personnel, wanting to understand what service really meant. She never lectured or gave formal presentations. She simply shared experiences, answered questions, and demonstrated through daily work that heroism wasn't about recognition. The faded desert ghost patch still wrote on her shoulder, and now everyone who saw it understood what it represented, not just a disbanded unit, but a philosophy that would never be retired. The desert protects its own, and legends never truly fade. Some patches, as the young soldiers learned, weren't just fabric and thread. They were woven from sand blood and the unbreakable belief that no one gets left behind. 6 months later, Alex Monroe received a call that would bring everything full circle. This is Colonel Harrison. We have a situation in Sector 7. Military convoy trapped by sandstorm. Multiple casualties. Standard rescue operations can't reach them due to conditions. Alex checked her equipment. Send me the coordinates, ma'am. Harrison continued. We're requesting civilian assistance. No one else can navigate those conditions. As Alex prepared her pickup for the rescue mission, she heard familiar voices on the radio. Desert Ghost. This is Warthog Lead. We're honored to provide air support. Looking up, she saw them approaching. Not just Rodriguez and his wingman, but an entire squadron of A-10. Word had spread through the pilot community, and everyone wanted to be part of this mission, ma'am. Rodriguez's voice came through clearly. Desert Ghost. Never walks alone today. We're all walking with you. The formation that moved across the desert that morning was unprecedented. A civilian pickup truck leading military aircraft through a sandstorm that had grounded every other rescue attempt. Alex navigated by instinct and experience, reading wind patterns and sand formations that others couldn't even see. The A-10s followed her lead, trusting her knowledge of the desert completely. The rescue was successful. 12 soldiers were extracted from conditions that military commanders had deemed impossible to survive. Alex drove through terrain that GPS couldn't map, guided by skills learned in operations that officially never happened. As they returned through clearing skies, Alex reflected on how much had changed. The faded patch on her shoulder no longer represented just a disbanded unit. It had become a symbol connecting generations of service members who understood that some things mattered more than regulations. The young pilots who had once dismissed civilian capabilities now sought opportunities to learn from her experience. They had discovered that wisdom didn't come from advanced technology or formal training alone, but from understanding gained through surviving the impossible in a world obsessed with procedures and protocols. Many had forgotten that the most important qualities couldn't be taught in classrooms: courage, adaptability, and the refusal to abandon those in need. These were values that transcended military branches and civilian boundaries. Alex didn't need medals or ceremonies. She just needed to know that when lives hung in the balance, there were people ready to follow her into the desert's most dangerous places. When her pickup truck returned to base that evening, the faded patch still visible on her shoulder, she was surrounded by pilots who had learned the most important lesson of military service. Some legends aren't made from cloth and thread. They're woven from sand and sacrifice, from the blood of those who walked before, and they never, ever backed down. The desert had reclaimed one of its own, and the legend of desert ghosts lived on. Not in official records, but in the hearts of those who understood that true service never retires. Subscribe Ironheart Stories if you believe quiet legends still own the sand, and they always will.